Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. I know I was supposed to be here yesterday, but I took a trip out to App State to visit my daughter after her first week of college, and I just didn't make it back in time. So sorry, my bad. Family first, as it should be, right? So what we're going to talk about today is a hodgepodge of things, but I want to catch you up on some key things. We're going to talk about some new stuff that's out at Courage is a Habit. I'm going to keep referring to that website. If you are not currently, signed up to get notifications from Courage is a Habit, you should be, because they are simply fantastic. I'm going to put the link they have like a link tree, and their link tree has a lot of links that are really helpful and give you access to opt-outs and infographics and all kinds of explainers and tools that you can use to protect your children. It's really that simple. I'm going to actually show you because I want you to just kind of want to eyeball this with you. I guess this would be the right one. All right. Can you see it? So you can see they've got a website. They have the data mining opt-out. Let me get back to a better screen. This is not the right screen for this. Here we go. All right. So you've got the website, the data mining opt-out, the SEL bloodline. These things are so fantastic. Survey says, this is hilarious. I actually want to take you guys through this. This came out last week. It couldn't be more perfect. It really couldn't be more perfect. This is Be Like Bill or Else, The Anatomy of a Social Contagion. They made a little cartoon book. And you absolutely should read it and share it with your friends, because one of the things we parents struggle with is both understanding and explaining how social contagions work. We start to feel crazy. I mean, that's one of the problems with talking about this stuff, isn't it? That you feel like the better you understand it and the more you explain it to other people, the more kind of cuckoo you sound. Well, by distilling it into this nice little story, they have done us such a great service because they've helped us explain it in simple terms most people can understand. So what they've done is they've got these transmission levels, and there are 6 levels of transmission of the social contagion. Think of it like a virus, right? 1, tolerance, 2, acceptance, 3, celebration, 4, promotion, 5, demands, and level 6, transformation. You are here. Okay. You are at level 6 in your child's K-12 school. We're way past all this. If you're wondering what happened to your church, you're like, why is my church also talking about some of these things and saying that, maybe a woman can be whatever she wants to be, whatever. That's because they didn't stop here, which is really, honestly, it's where any of us should stop, whether you're talking about people of faith or not. That, tolerance, that's about, tolerance just means like, I'm not going to, hurt you, gang up on you, hate you or any of these things because you're different or because there's something going on or whatever. I tolerate this. I'm going to be, okay. But we went way past that. I think some people tried to, thank you, Mark. Some people tried to stop here at acceptance. They thought they could stop here, but here's my piece of advice for you. The instant you go past level 1, you are just on a trajectory that's going to be very hard to backtrack from. And I'll show you why. So we've got Bill. There's Bill, sad looking Bill. This is Bill's disgusting, stinky house. He's a hoarder, so it smells. His front yard, he's got garbage, 20 cats and dogs. I mean, it's like one of those TV show nightmares about hoarders. So we've got Anne, who's good friends with Bill, and she's a level 1 tolerance. She's like, hey, Bill, it's like, I love you, but you stink. Your house is gross. It's not good. You should really not be doing this. And he says, none of your business. And if you're, it doesn't affect you, leave me alone. Now, there are a whole lot of people who are here with a lot of things, whether it's the fact that they're, have certain political beliefs, or maybe they like to have, they like to go hunting and you don't, or maybe they are vegan and you're not, or, whatever it is. There are a lot of different things like, hey, doesn't affect your life, but out, none of your business. Okay. And then that's, most of us would grudgingly agree if we're going to plan to stay friends. If we don't want to agree with that, then we're probably not going to stay friends, and the downward trajectory ends. But you see, Bill takes it a step farther and says, friend, you haven't visited me. You must not really tolerate me. You must not really be a good friend. They use emotional blackmail, whatever. And so she caves in and starts to visit. But what happened here? What exactly is it that occurred? What it is that occurred is that Anne let down her personal boundaries and allowed herself to be, let's face it, bullied by Bill. She was bullied. Now, it's a nice kind of bullying. It's like, you don't visit me, you don't call, you don't come over. Yeah, your place smells like cat piss, but, meh. And she lets down her boundaries and decides to go hang out in the cat piss smelling house. That's up to each of us what we want to do. But my advice to you, and of course, I hope the advice you pass to your children is, if you're uncomfortable, even if the discomfort's caused by the smell of cat urine, respect that. And a true friend would respect that too and meet you somewhere else. Like, how about, Bill, you come to my house? Or, hey, Bill, let's meet at the Starbucks. Or maybe, Bill, what is this? Thank you, Dad. We love, be like, Bill, we support Harry, though. Okay. Is that another one? Am I supposed to go through another one? Is that a new one? I keep missing. I have to keep up with these guys. They come up with such great content. Anyway, so she let her guard down. She let down her boundaries. And when it comes to SEL and it comes to the things they're trying to teach our kids, this is what the teacher's doing to your child. So what your teacher's doing is saying, well, if you were a good ally, if you really were a good person, if you really wanted, if you cared about others, if you were truly empathetic and compassionate, and sometimes they don't even go to the if you were, they say you have to be. You have to be. And there's the child. The child's in Anne's position. The teacher's in Bill's position, but they use a nice, sweet voice. And I'll show you what nice, sweet voice sounds like in a minute. And they essentially he's telling Anne a lie. He's telling her a lie. He's saying, if you were a real friend, you would do X. When she's already been a real friend. She's already told him it's not a healthy way to live in his hoarder lifestyle. That's a real friend. That's a real friend. Okay. So this is what they're doing to your kids. And of course, then the next thing is, tell others how wonderful my house is. Now we get to the tell others how important it is to be an ally. Tell others how important it is to make a plan, and and here's the plan. I have a poster, but look at Anne's face. Is she happy with this decision? No. No more probably than your child is happy being nicely with a sweet smile, browbeaten into accepting things and celebrating things that they don't want to celebrate, or they just feel uncomfortable celebrating. And then, of course, we have to get to promotion. Now we have flags everywhere, and we got to have books everywhere, and we have pride parades, and we have, who knows what else we're celebrating now. We're celebrating this thing that initially we just thought, to be a good person, we just tolerate it. It's like, okay, your life doesn't affect me. Is it affecting them now? I think it's affecting them now. Now it's taking up time on a Saturday, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, whatever it is, that we got to be out protesting and celebrating and doing all these things. Bill owns a piece of these people, doesn't he now? And the same thing happens with social contagion, that they no longer are autonomous individuals who get to make their own decision free and clear. Okay. So I will answer everyday treasures. I will get to that. I'll answer your question in just a moment. Okay. So, and then we get to demands. We know it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop at the celebration. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to have the pride parade. Remember, we just used to have a pride parade a day, and it was for adults, and we didn't have it in the schools. Then it came into the schools, and now it's not enough to have. Now it's a month. Now it's posters. Now it's action. Now it's so many other things. So this came from demands. It wasn't good enough to celebrate. We got to demand it. Look at them dutifully following with their deer in headlights eyeballs. Oh, Bill is a hero. Save Bill. Okay. Because by the time you get to the meeting other people's demands, this is every person you ever saw on Twitter with their "I'm so sorry" heartfelt apology, which of course is never good enough. And once you give in to demands, as any hostage negotiator will tell you, you're on the hook for more demands. There's no end point to it. I mean, any of us parents who've had given in to a toddler know that. Well, Bill's a toddler. And these poor people are now in service to a toddler. And then, of course, transformation. That means we now have to turn Anne either into a hoarder or into somebody who is going to commit a large portion of her life to making sure that hoarding is normalized. It's no longer something we tolerate. It's not even something we accept. It's it's the norm. Guess what you are if you don't hoard? Well, obviously you're a bigot. Obviously you're a bigot. So here's Harry. This must be why we love Harry. Okay. One lone neighbor named Harry speaks up and points out that Bill's house looks disgusting and the stench can be detected from across the street. The neighbors accuse Harry of being a sensory phobe. Don't be Harry. But of course, we love Harry. Harry is the only person in this whole story with any boundaries who's willing to tell the truth. And that's just how it is. So they say, don't give power to labels, make no apologies, speak up loud and often, make courage a habit in your home. And thank you, Alvin and everybody over at Courage is a Habit. This is so fantastic. And as I said, you can find it here on this wonderful link tree. It has this SEL primer. There's a newsletter. You can become a supporter. Please do that. People who do this work put, as you can see, a lot of time and effort into it, and they could use your support. So fantastic. I mean, like, they come up with things all the time, and I'm like, you guys are gonna put me out of a job. Not even that this is my job, but you know what I mean? They're nailing it, like absolutely nailing it. So get these things, share them with all your friends. Somebody says, I don't really understand it. Introduce them to Bill and maybe they'll understand. And you can substitute for hoarding, substitute whatever. Anything that's being demanded of you, in particular the gender stuff. That's right now the most in your face. You have DEI, anti-racism and all that. But the thing that's really being pushed right now is the gender stuff. And I'm going to show you an example of what that looks like. But before I do, I want to answer this question from Everyday Treasures. What do you think about Time for Learning? Time for Learning, for those of you who do not know, is an online school, for lack of a better term, sort of a um, you're so welcome, Alvin. It's an online school for parents who want to homeschool, but they are concerned about getting it all in one place, like making sure they get everything done, with all the subjects covered, with according to standards, state standards, things. If you're a little tentative and not sure what you should be doing, but you don't want your kid to go to the school, if you want it to be a little more tailored to their abilities, but still be in line with your state standards and stuff like that, Time for Learning is a great, what I would call, like, intermediary tool. I have some concerns about it of late because of what I've been learning about data mining in general. I mean, full disclosure, I've used Time for Learning long ago. We're talking about like 2009, 2010, years ago. But what I used it for was, I used it for days I was sick when I was homeschooling. I used it for days when my kids were just having a day. They just were like, didn't want to do any of their work in their folders and just wanted to sit at the computer and do some lessons. And I wanted to keep track of what they were doing. And I would say, go do a couple of Time for Learning lessons. And they would be doing something. If I, needed the time or the space, then Time for Learning was a good sort of backfill for that. As far as having it be like your only school or the thing you do in lieu of education, I'm not a giant fan, again, because I feel like it's a little too much time on the computer. It's all interactive, which can be good for some kids, but for other kids, it's too much time in the computer, and you have that dopamine rush. It's very similar to what you get from social media, that need for like things to be entertaining all the time, when we actually need our kids to have some sustained attention and be comfortable with, working something out, not to be miserable, but just to like be curious. So if the curiosity isn't stimulated because there's constantly something like, being interactive, that can be too much. So I would say proceed with caution. It's a good way to kind of buy yourself some time or get started or have a fill in for when you're sick or your child isn't feeling very well. But I still recommend, if you're going to be homeschooling, to look for something that is not predominantly online. It is what I would call uh, like e-school in the literal sense. And while it keeps great records, and I wonder how much of that's going back to somebody else, like a corporation that's buying the data, but you know, you can do better than that in my opinion. But it is a reasonable cost, and if you're nervous or you need to have somebody else watch your child during the day so you can go to work and they need something to have the kid do, it's a good learning activity to use sometimes. How's that? Um, so that's my answer to the question. I hope that helps. All right. So, and then I want to see what Anna is saying. Yes, this is how teacher-sponsored bullying works, by disguising bullies as victims, bullying and coercing victims of bullying to comply. Yes, they have turned all of this inside out, and we have a weaponized empathy. And I was talking to somebody earlier today about this, how ironic it is that there's so much talk about trauma-informed education, and we need to treat these kids as if they've been automatically traumatized because of their race, as an example. Like all Black children are traumatized because they're Black. I mean, there are teachers who actually say that out loud, which to me is really awful. So but their solution to the presumed trauma of people based on the color of their skin is to traumatize others and to tell the presumed traumatized child, you go ahead and you wallow in that. You go ahead and marinate in that trauma, be good and pissed off. I mean, they obviously don't say that in so many words, but what else are you doing? Now, I'm a child. I've said on the channel many times, I'm an adult child of actual traumatic experiences. Nothing like so bad it would be on a Lifetime made for TV movie, but borderline mommy dearest action. Okay. So I actually liked the fact that when I went to school, there was Montessori initially, or then public school, that nobody knew about it. Nobody knew about it. Nobody talked about it. Nobody wanted to talk to me about it. It was a haven away from the crap going on at home that I really would like to have had a break from. Thank you very much. So if somebody had said like, oh, trauma, oh, like wanted in any way, shape, or form to discuss it with me, document it, have me draw about it, whatever, I would have been like, please leave me alone. I just wouldn't want to deal with it. And further, if I had any messaging coming at me, and again, I'm personalizing this, maybe other kids wouldn't feel this way, but I've talked to some therapists and they sort of agree with me that this isn't really how you get out of it. One of the ways you deal with trauma, you work through it, is you work through it. You get past it. You know you're done when you can look at people who look like the person who traumatized you or have a similar role in life to the person who traumatized you, and you see that person as an individual, not as a representative of the person who traumatized you. Because otherwise, you're still in PTSD, big time. And that's not a place you want to hang out. That is unhealthy. That's not a good place to live. And you start engaging in, guess what? Abuse. Yes, victimized people can abuse other people if they don't work through the abuse they suffered. That is how cycles repeat. How many times have you even seen it in those Lifetime movies where the abused becomes the abuser? It's almost, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of like a storyline at this point that, well, they must have been abused as a child because now they're an abuser. Well, why did that occur? Why did that occur? Because at no point in time was that interrupted. At no point in time was it, this happened to you and this was awful. But this was this. This is not representative of how all people are who look like this, sound like this, have this role in life or whatever. And so if you're going to, first of all, make a presumption about somebody based on superficial characteristic, race or gender, then you're going to project onto them feelings, trauma, all kinds of things that they may or not have. And then you're going to presume to tell them how they should handle it when you're neither a clinician nor a person who really even knows if any of the assumptions you're making are true or correct. You are abusing that person. You are abusing them. There's no other way to put it. Okay. So if you're in that cycle and you're doing the demands and the celebration and the this and that, that's abuse. And I say it all the time in the channel and I get a lot of pushback. People are like, oh, Deb, that's so wrong and you shouldn't call it abuse. And I really don't agree with that choice of words. And I'm like, okay, I'll Give me a better word. Give me a better word than abuse when you have a person in a position of authority or power over a person who is literally subservient to them, a student who is also younger, so has a perception of like your power because you're bigger and older and all that than I am. And so you already have that perception of I'm supposed to do what you tell me to do, or I'm supposed to defer to you. And the person leads with assumptions, presumptions in this case, and they are making statements about how you might feel, could feel, do feel, should feel without even asking. And then they back that up with then they ask probing, intrusive questions. They don't wait for you to come to them. Remember, it's a life skill to ask for help. And it might sound cruel because, oh, but not every person who's had trauma is going to feel safe enough to ask for help. Well, I have a little experience with this, again, not just from my personal life, but having been a teacher. And going at somebody who you even know for a fact has been traumatized is a really bad way to go. It's a really bad way to go. Again, if somebody had done that to me and I had a student where an older teacher, and this is going back to 1989, and the teacher I was working with, the master teacher I worked with was in her 60s, and we were in an all-black kindergarten in West Philadelphia, and there was a very badly traumatized student in the class. He didn't want to speak. He was nonverbal. That's how badly traumatized he was. He hid under a desk every day. His grandmother brought him to school. So her approach was not like, let's all gather around him and all share and all talk about our traumas and let's all get, into this. She let him be. And we would take turns going and sitting by him, reading whatever the rest of the class was reading. But we would always ask, is it okay if I sit by you? And he would nod, but he wouldn't speak. Is it okay if I sit by you? Okay, I'm going to sit by you. Is it okay if I read with you? Okay, I'm going to read with you. So we would ask each time, like, are you okay with this interaction? Because he was making it very clear, I'm not really psyched to be around people right now. And we just kind of let him be. It took a long time, you guys, like months, before he would come out, before he would utter words, before he would speak, etc. But at no time was he like yanked out of that, and nor were the other students made to feel bad about continuing to move on with life. They didn't have to stop because of his trauma. And he learned, and I mean, I won't tell you the rest of the tragic story because I talk about it in another interview, which I'm going to be publishing tomorrow. But in that time that we did get him to speak, he asked for help in his own way. He started coming out and asking for help. That is such an important skill, but you have to feel a level of comfort with people respecting your boundaries before you're going to do that. You have to know that people aren't going to push you. They're not going to pressure you. They're not going to go like, tell me about your home life. Tell me about your parents. What's in your medicine cabinet? How often do you feel like this? Do you feel good today? Did you feel bad yesterday? After a while, like even as an adult, if somebody did that to you every day or every week, would you be like, leave me alone? Well, now imagine you're 6 or 7 or 8 or 10. And that's what we're doing. I don't know how that is trauma informed unless you're saying, we know it traumatizes people. We want to do it more. So we're trauma informed educators. And I don't mean to be glib or sarcastic, but that's what it's starting to seem like. So now I'm going to show you an example of a teacher. And I'll be honest with you guys, this was quite horrifying to me. It really was. I watched this, and I don't know if we're going to go through more than a couple minutes of this. In fact, I'm quite sure we're not. Because I think if we did, you would hate me and you would immediately log off and you would never come back. But I had to sit through it. But I want you to see this. This comes to me from a whistleblower. Once again, in New Jersey. I would get a lot of things from New Jersey. I know a bunch of people there, so that's part of why. But also it just is a hotbed of the stuff, as is California. And the original post on Facebook was parent reports a gender confusion book for second graders, Avon Elementary School, Barrington, New Jersey. And then the Facebook person said, please reply to this post if the book is in your school. And to opt out, here's a consent form, for opting out. You can check Courage as a Habit for opting out forms as well. But I'm going to play this video, or a little bit of it in any event, and hopefully you'll be able to hear the sound, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay. So, here we go. This is a teacher, I guess, or somebody. This is on YouTube Kids. She goes by Nana Cece. Don't know if that's her real name or not, but let's listen. Again, please, let me know immediately if you're not able to hear it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nana Cece. Welcome to my story time. Today, we're going to read It Feels Good to Be Yourself. I hope you enjoy it. It Feels Good to Be Yourself, a book about gender identity. Written by Teresa Thorne, illustrated by Noah Gridgeny. This is Ruthie. She's a transgender girl. That means when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy until she grew a little older, old enough to tell everyone that she's actually a girl.
So, this is Ruthie. And when she was born, everyone thought she was a boy. It's so subtle, right? First of all, the voice. The voice. Okay. So, everyone thought. Implication, everyone was wrong. And in fact, you'll hear in a part in a minute how she talks about people turning out to be right. Like, oh, look, they just happen to be right about her brother. But until she got a little older and told everyone that she was actually a girl. So she just came up with that all by herself, did she? Also notice something really quite unusual for today's time period, and that is the depiction of a girl child, or even a girl identifying child, as stereotypically feminine as it gets, wearing a dress to school, and in pink, no less, with long wavy hair. And she's got, she couldn't look more feminine, right? So again, with the stereotype, we've spent how many decades trying to move away from these regressive stereotypes that, a girl equals pink jumper and long hair and a ponytail and all these things. Like, why couldn't Ruthie be wearing jeans and a t-shirt? She could have long hair still if she wants. But you know what I'm saying? Like, they go all the way. They go all the way. And then listen to it continues.
Girl is Ruthie's gender identity. This is Ruthie's brother, Xavier. Xavier is a cisgender boy. That means when Xavier was born, everyone thought he was a boy. And as he grew older, it turned out everyone was right. He is a boy.
Well, what do you know? They were right. It just turned out that way. Everyone was right. Ruthie, on the other hand, had to let everyone know. Why didn't Xavier have to let them know he was actually a boy? Hey, guys, I just want to let you know I'm actually a boy. Yep, you were right. I am actually a boy. No, it just turned out that way. But Ruthie had to let them know. Ruthie let them know, you guys are wrong. I wasn't really a boy. There's just so many things about this. So now you're a second grader. That means you're about 7 years old. You're hearing this story, and everything is presented to you in the story as if it is truth. It is fact. There's nothing in here that says some people believe this. And yet that's the truth. The truth is some people believe this theory, this belief system, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. Most people don't. Actually, vast majority of people don't. The vast majority of parents probably whose kids are being subjected to this don't, if they really stop and think about it. They're just not quite sure how to say that they don't, or what to say, because it's being presented as this is a fact you just never knew. We're enlightening you. You were just wrong before. To me, it's like people suddenly waking up and saying the earth is flat. Just accept that it's flat and you were wrong about it being round. Just accept that because we said so. And you're like, but I can see that it's round. No, it's an optical illusion. You were wrong. Evidence. We believe it, so it's true. And the problem is this book goes on, it continues onward to where they go into, this is Ruthie's friend Alex. Alex is both a boy and a girl. Not Alex thinks that they are both a boy and a girl. Alex is both a boy and a girl. Subtle, but really important distinction. 7-year-old kid is hearing this. Oh, you can be both? Well, surely why not? The book said so. The book presented to me in school by the super sweet sounding teacher who couldn't possibly mean me any harm. When Alex was born, everyone thought Alex was a girl, but Alex is both boy and girl. This is Alex's gender identity. I mean, and we go on to, ever since JJ was very little, they never felt exactly like a boy or a girl. They just felt like themselves. This is JJ's gender identity. So we're making it seem to young children that A, there is such a thing as gender identity, which again is not an agreed upon fact. B, that it's tied up in how you feel, as if we could know what it would feel like to not feel like what we are. Can we ever feel like something we aren't? No. Can we know what other people feel like to feel them? No. So do we really know? Do I know what it feels like to be a woman? No, because I would never be another woman. I can only be me. So I can only know what it feels like to be me. That's literally the only thing I can know is what it feels like to be Deb. Now, I couldn't possibly tell you if that's feeling like a woman, feeling like a man, feeling like a tree, feeling like I've never been a tree. I've never been a man, and I've never been another woman. So I don't feel like any of those things, nor will I ever, because I can't, because it's not physically possible. But instead of acquainting our children with reality, that we can't feel like things we've never been and never will be, they're saying, I never felt like this, I never felt like that. Well, why would you? Why would you? What is it to feel like a boy or a girl? Literally, no one can quantify that or say what that is. It's not possible. It's completely unverifiable. The person who wrote this book, the person teaching this book, the teachers who believe this garbage and are teaching it to our children as fact cannot answer that question. If you have not yet watched Matt Walsh's movie, please do, because he captures the essence of this problem very, very well. But what I really don't like, and then they go on with non-binary, and then it says some kids don't feel exactly like a boy or a girl. They feel neither. Some kids feel that their gender identity isn't always the same. It's often changing. Now, some of us would say some children are quite disturbed or, not like having problems. And again, not because they don't feel exactly like a boy or like a girl, but because they feel like they should. That something's wrong with them because they just don't know exactly who they are yet. Hey, guess what? That's normal. You're a kid. And that there's something they're supposed to feel that equates with being the sex they were born. Who said so? Who said so? Who said and who told these children? Of course they're confused. Of course they don't know what they feel like. Well, I don't know. I don't feel like a girl or a boy. Who told them they were supposed to? Because they have parts? Because they have specific body parts? This is so completely regressive, and people aren't even hearing it. They think this is the most modern thing in the world. I'm like, no, this is absolutely caveman levels of regressive. This turns all the progress we've made on its ear. What a girl would do. Can you clarify what a girl would do? I'm not sure I know what you mean. But this doesn't make any sense, but they're presenting it as fact. And the part that really got under my skin, let's see if I can find it, is Okay. And even with all these possible ways to be, some kids don't feel any of the words they know fit them exactly right. There are a never ending number of ways to be yourself in the world. Well, that's true. But now they're conflating a never ending number of ways to be yourself because you're an individual, you're unique, with an ever and never ending number of sexes or genders or permutations of that. Notice they've dropped the term expression. It used to be gender expression. There used to be multiple ways you could express your girlness or your boyness. And that's what we work towards through, all those decades of free to be you and me and all these things that, a boy likes dolls and a girl likes trucks. And those were ways that you express. I expressed being a girl by playing with, trucks, blocks. Ironically, though, I would say it's not expressing being a girl. I expressed being Deb. I expressed being me, not being a girl, expressed being me playing with blocks. And some a boy might express being him playing with dolls. But they weren't a boy trapped in a girl's body because they played with dolls, or a girl trapped in a boy's body because I play with blocks or trucks. I wasn't expressing girlness, I was expressing Debness. But instead of teaching our kids that they can have an expression of themselves, of their whole self, not this little part determined by body parts or hormones. We're breaking them up into tiny little pieces of what would otherwise be themselves and then saying how wonderful it is. Whether you feel like a boy or a girl, both or neither, if you describe yourself another way, that's your gender identity. Again, there's a thing, we made it up. It's called gender identity. And now you little child better figure out what yours is because you're supposed to have one. That's the implication here. So you've got a bunch of kids sitting in a class, second grade, going, I wonder what mine is. I don't know. I don't really feel like a girl. I don't really feel like a boy. Well, I don't know. What does a girl feel like? Well, what does a boy feel like? I don't know, but I don't feel like one. I feel like a cat. I feel like a dog. I feel like a princess. I feel like a mermaid. I feel like whatever. It's just so incredibly confusing and wrong. And I don't approve. And I mean, if that makes me some kind of, prude, I'm sorry. But what a girl will do when a teacher in front of the class says she is not she, but they, and they have an extremely high suicide rate and they will kill themselves if anyone, uh, what a girl will do, misgender them. So you're saying that the kids will go along with this if the teacher says that the teacher's not a she, but a they? I'm still not sure I follow. Like, is there a question in there? Because I see the question mark and I'm not sure how to answer. So if you can ask me the question kind of in a just like what you want me to answer, then I'm happy to do that. I'm not really sure I follow. I'm so sorry. Um, all right. So then, and then they go on to like when you were born, you couldn't tell people who you were, how you felt. Newsflash, you can't ever. I still can't. 56 years old, I can't tell you like what it feels like to be a woman. I don't know. I know what it feels like to be me. I know I'm okay with what I got. No issues there. But I don't know. Does that mean I feel like a woman? Don't feel like anything else. Wouldn't know if I did. So, then they go through all of this. When people guess wrong, guess. I don't know. It's got a penis. It's got a scrotum. It's got testicles. What do you think? You think girl, boy? I don't know. Let's flip a coin. Let's guess. What are the odds? I mean, this is anyway. Okay, you get the point. That was the video. That's being shown to second graders. Now, moving on. What does that become in middle school? So that's second grade. Second graders are taught this sort of thing. And then we come to something that Frank McCormick put out on Twitter this week. Hillsborough County Middle School Library has a book graphically detailing how to have gay sex and use the gay hookup app Grindr, using kid-friendly language like blowies and bumming. This is literally what grooming children for sex looks like. Yes. Thank you. Okay, that I get it. I'm saying that in my opinion, it's an instigation of a suicidal behavior, which must be considered as a child abuser or child abuse. Yes, I agree. I agree. Why would you intentionally set out to confuse children? They come into school. I'm a girl, I'm a boy, whatever. I mean, they come into school feeling relatively certain about who they are. And to those who might say, well, but there's a percentage you just don't, and they body dysmorphia. Yes, it's an incredibly small percentage. You might have one child in a school of 500 people maximum who feels sincerely confused about what gender they are, what sex they are at 7. And it's not just I want to be like mommy or I want to be like daddy. So I say that I want to be a boy or I say I want to be a girl, but like they sincerely have body dysmorphia. Extraordinarily rare. Extraordinarily rare. And they outgrow it. They still generally outgrow it. You're very welcome. Thank you for clarifying. So if you set out to preempt that and throw it out there that, all of you were guessed about, your parents just totally guessed. So what does that do to the 7-year-old child? Like they now doubt their parents. What if they guessed wrong? What the hell? Right? So you got that going on. Then you got them wondering like, well, if I don't feel anything, I don't feel anything. What does that mean? Now I'm confused. I was not confused 5 minutes ago. Now I'm confused. This is cruel. It is absolutely cruel. And then especially to Anna's point, if they're going to say that, oh, the trans kids commit suicide so much more, why would you want to instigate this? Not to mention, we now know actually that 20 years after transition, there's a high rate of suicide amongst those who transitioned, especially as children. Not the adults typically, but as children. So this book is quite insane. Blowies. And this is and I'm going to read this. I don't know if you guys can see these words. I don't want to say these words, and I'm an adult woman, and I'm not a prude. I'm so squeamish about this because I know it's aimed at middle school children. We are talking about children who are basically 11 years old to 13 years of age. This is just not appropriate. It's not appropriate. I'm sorry. They should be reading How to Train Your Dragon or Harry Potter. So there's that. Which is not nice. Then, what else do we have? This is a thing. Children's sexual citizenship, changing notions of the sexual child. It's a thing. The illustration is from a book called Children's Sexuality, A Guide. I don't want to click that link. It seems as though a dark view of children and sexuality has arisen since the political changes of the 1980s. Our own contemporary worries about the omnipresent pedophile limits the case for sexual citizenship for children because it refutes the political space and agency that needs to be created for this to happen. So much here. Needs to be created? According to whom? Dark view? According to whom? Our worries about the omnipresent pedophile. Well, I don't know. You're not really allaying my fears here. It's like whatever they might have been. If I was like this close to moral panic, you're not helping me. Okay, I try not to have moral panics. I think they're kind of irrational, but you're not helping. You're not really dissuading me from my moral panic with this. The notion of the child. Did you know your child was a notion? The notion of a child. Just like childhood itself is in constant flux. No, it's not. It's not. We have had some flux around what is a child, but that flux usually is centuries, is about how long it takes. Like 100 years, we kind of hang out, sometimes much longer than 100 years. We hang out with one notion of what a child is, and then we have a shift, and we have another nice long period of time of what a child is, and it's been getting progressively closer to what Piaget taught us and brain science has taught us is kind of the physical, hormonal, developmental reality of what a child is. You see, you have the sociological definition of a child, and then you have the legal definition of a child, and then you have the physical and cognitive definition of a child. I try to get as close to measurable things as I can and start there. So I'm going to start with the cognitive development and the developmental levels of the brain and what we know happens from birth to roughly 25, 26 years of age. So 18 kind of falls closer to the 26 side than it does to the birth side. And I'm going to go with that one. And then I'm going to bring in a little Piaget. Okay. Yeah, he's not perfect. There's things that, would change up, but it's a pretty solid place to start, concrete, working our way towards abstract thought. Children, therefore, as opposed to young adults, meaning 18 to 26, I don't consider a 17-year-old a young adult, even though they write books and call it young adult literature. No, a young adult is 18 to 25, 26 years of age. That's a young adult, technically, cognitively, because we know that the cerebral cortex, this part that which governs like reason and abstract thinking and logic and making decisions and long-term planning and all that kind of stuff. That's not really like fully on board and working until about 26. And we know it doesn't come to a point where it's like, okay, maybe you can, vote till 18. And that's why we have the limits that we have. That's why. So no, a child is not constantly in flux. I dispute the premise strongly. Depending on the topics, morals, and values with which the idea of a child is combined, tensions transform and substitute across time. If you say so, disagree vehemently. I don't think they do. They transform across philosophies, not across time. They do transform across time, but not as quickly as you think, not like in 10-year increments. We don't go back to, we don't go back to 2000 or even 2010 and say, yeah, we had a very different concept of a child in 2010 than we do in 2022. Not really. No, not really. And to the extent we do, it's been forced on us, not by choice, not because the majority of people slowly, organically move towards a different definition of a child. We are being dragged kicking and screaming by our hair by a bunch of, in my personal opinion, self-interested people who are looking to make money from our children and looking to abuse them. So that's me. And let's see. So this is the thing now. There was a program, I guess, in Sweden where they tried to restore the innocence of children. This person is criticizing it. They respect my body, a handbook for grownups and how to talk to children. This is private, whatever. I'm looking at this going, good. That's a step in the right direction. This article is critical. This article is making fun of people doing this. So is it any wonder they make fun of people like me and others who don't want things to be like this? Now they're getting into sexual reproductive health and rights. Well, a child is not really mature, sexually mature in terms of reproductive health. That's not right when the girl has her first period or the boy has her first nocturnal emission. That's not sexual maturity. That's a sign that, puberty's kicked off and, it's really kicking off. That girl goes to have a baby, she's at high risk. That's a high risk pregnancy. That is not a pregnancy you want to be having, a 10 or 11-year-old girl. Okay. That's seriously a life-threatening situation. A boy getting somebody pregnant at that age might not physically threaten his life because it's not happening inside his body, but that's going to mess him up. How many 10 or 11-year-old dads do we want out there? Okay. So just because their bodies can do certain things does not mean that we need to be, treating them as if they're sexually mature adults. They're not. Should they know about sexual health so they don't go and mess around and do things like that? Probably. But does that mean it's the school's job to teach them? No. It's just not the school's job. They're strangers, ultimately. And this idea that, well, parents aren't going to teach them, parents aren't going to talk about it, I think is itself a moral panic. It's not grounded in reality. It's not. Okay. So, yes, there are parents who will hesitate to talk to their 10-year-old about these things, but there are also a whole lot who won't. So, this is a thing. Then, moving on, we have this charming thing. And I'm going once again to play something for you. We're leaving the gender realm and we're getting into who gets to decide how your child should be educated, because I think they go together. If you're concerned about what's going on in schools around gender and around identity, and you're concerned about your children being, emotionally and psychologically abused by teachers pushing this stuff on them, then I think it should concern you greatly that there are people around the world who consider it to be their right to oversee education, even when it's being done privately. Okay. So this gentleman is David Moinina Senga. He's the chair of UNESCO's 2021-2022 Global Education Monitoring Report. This was at the Rewired Summit last year. And I think when you hear what he has to say, and this is a video that Lisa Logan made, so there's going to be juxtaposed with some other information, but I definitely want you guys to hear this. All right, here we go. Let's see if it works. Sometimes you have to open these up a little differently. Why isn't it working? Write the rules. I don't know why this happens. Okay.
2022 Global Education Monitoring Reports rallying call. Who chooses? Who loses? Invites policymakers to question relationships with non-state actors in terms of fundamental choices and their trade-offs between equity and freedom of choice, two pillars of the right to education.
First of all, the right to education. This gets talked about a lot and people just blow on by it. They just blow on by it. You don't, in the United States anyway, you don't have a right to an education. You have an entitlement that is guaranteed under each state constitution. And you have entitlements under the federal and under federal law and civil rights law, based on the state constitutions giving you that entitlement. So now you have a right to equal protection and equal access to that entitlement, because once you create an entitlement, now we have to have equal access under the law, right? But a fundamental right to an education you do not have. You certainly have, as a human being, a right to seek an education. You have a right to educate yourself. That's like freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom of thought. All those things go into education, right? But education in terms of schooling, in terms of the services and products and all the things that go into delivering a thing, a product, a package called education, no, you don't have a right to that, because that's the labor and material possessions and property of others. You can't have a right to other people's labor and property. You just can't. It's nonsensical. So when people talk about the right to an education, don't just keep on going. Like, stop right there and question that premise, because and listen for what they define education as. Do they define it as an attitude or a way of living or a way of approaching learning, as I do? Or do they define it as a thing, a product, a consumer good, an entitlement bucket of stuff and money? That's what he's doing. Hint.
Between encouraging initiative and setting standards.
And also notice he said, who gets to choose? And he acts like it's a foregone conclusion that there's a conflict between state and non-state actors, meaning public and private, and between freedom of choice and oversight and like standards. He's saying there exists a conflict between freedom of choice and standards. The only reason that such a conflict exists is because the government says so. Because the government assumes the authority to set the standards, to write the rules, as they say. But if we challenge that, if we say, no, why do you get to decide what standard should be used to educate my child? What's different about that than saying, oh, there's a conflict between the right to choose how to feed your child and standards? I mean, food is arguably more necessary than education to survival. Parents could malnourish their children. Happens every day, I guess. But why isn't the government coming in and saying, I don't know, we can't let you have too much choice because, we got to have standards in how you feed? Well, why? The simple answer is that it's not necessary to the sustenance of the government that you feed your kid broccoli. But it is necessary to the sustenance and the long-term health of the government that you feed your kids propaganda about how awesome the government is.
Between groups of varying means and needs, between immediate commitments under SDG 4 and those to be progressively realized. It calls for governments to see all institutions, students, and teachers as part of a single system.
So what he's saying here is the UNESCO report that he's talking about calls for all teachers, students, and, delivery educators, everybody to be seen as one single system. Yes, that includes your child. That includes the children, the students, the teachers, and the institutions, all as part of a single system. That's what it calls for, this report. And
to use common quality standards, common monitoring and support processes for all
common quality standards and common monitoring standards.
All providers. Governance systems can be complex when multiple actors are involved.
Yes. Government systems can be very complex when we have multiple actors involved. Oh, how I feel so bad for the government. It's so complex to monitor and oversee all these private non-state actors. Oh, poor babies.
This makes oversight that much more important.
This makes oversight that much more important. We can't let those private non-state actors be doing anything different than we would want them to do. Got to have more oversight of them.
Report warns that inequality and exclusion can also result if private education is not effectively regulated.
Did you hear that? Inequality and exclusion can result if private education is not effectively regulated. So what have I been talking about in this channel for a week and a half now, at least in earnest? School choice, TM, trademark. ESAs, possible regulations that will come with taking the money and vouchers. The strings that might be attached to those private schools to regulate them for oversight to make sure those non-state actors are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, this is UNESCO. And some of you might be tempted to say, well, that's not the United States. It doesn't have anything to do with us. Doesn't it, though? Doesn't it? Joe Biden is part of that. It's like, I know they're constantly citing UNESCO stuff. The UNESCO is being quoted by our Department of Education left, right, and center. Don't be so sure. Unless you're explicitly told otherwise, assume this will impact it. And Lisa puts this up. In a paper prepared for the UNESCO GM report, the authors lay out how public money funding private schools through school choice and the regulation and accountability that comes with it can ensure that all education aligns with government's equity goals. Boom. We are not crazy people. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is observable reality. We are saying, here is this thing. Here are the goals. They're spelling it out. They're saying how this can work. They're citing it by name, school choice programs and ESAs. And we're just saying, what do you have to say about it, folks, over School Choice Inc.? Care to tell us why we're wrong? And we get this, well, we're just going to have to be that much more vigilant. I'm sorry, what? That worked out real well for us with our public schools. We'll just have to be vigilant that they're not indoctrinating our children and grooming them into all kinds of crazy, beliefs. Yeah, that worked real well. And every time we try as parents to be vigilant, we're ordered out of the building. We're called domestic terrorists. We're called conspiracy theorists and crazy people. We're gaslit. This isn't really happening. Then, of course, 6 months later, when we show you, 18 pounds of receipts and we foiled ourselves into an early grave, then it's like, oh, yeah, well, it's not happening enough. It went from not happening to it's a good thing and it's not happening enough. Well, there are some of us who are not waiting to be gaslit and not waiting to be dragged through those other phases. Been there, done that, ate the popcorn. Not interested. Give us answers now. So that's what she says there.
The report's peer website will help inform our policy dialogue on this issue. It tracks and compares non-state provision regulations in 211 countries.
211 countries. Do you think the United States might be one of those 211 countries? I think it's probably one of those 211 countries. And they're tracking their little reports. They're tracking the regulations and provisions for equity. How long do you think it's going to be before they go, those private schools in Arizona have applications and they're too selective. He says at the beginning of the speech, which is in a different part of the video that she didn't use, he says that, too many of these schools around the world have selective admissions criteria. Bad, naughty. And, why do parents want their kids to go to private school in the first place? Right? Because they're not public schools, because they have more discipline. They have selective admissions criteria. They have special programs. They have things that are different. So what he's basically saying is, no, we can't let the non-state. He is talking about non-state actors filling a physical gap, not a quality gap, just a numbers game. We need more seats. We need more teachers. We need more physical plant. We need more dollars. We need more, whatever stuff that we're going to appropriate and stick the kids in those buildings to take care of the need to educate all these children. Like it's like we have a distribution problem of hotel beds or hospital beds or something like that. That's what they're treating schools as a commodity item. Quality be damned. We can't have those differences because then that impedes equity
around the world.
And now she says, UNESCO's vision for regulation of private education in the U.S., school choice from their peer website. This is from their own website. Charter schools like magnet schools are considered public schools of choice, whereas the public funding of education options in the private sector through vouchers, education savings accounts, and scholarship tax credits is referred to as private choice. State policies have been increasingly adopting more choice policies, which critics tend to view as the privatization of education in the U.S., namely the implementation of vouchers, blah, blah, blah. Then it says public money following the child into private education through school choice vouchers and ESA legislation is their strategy on how to get non-state private education actors in each nation to have to comply with the same regulation as public. And I keep asking people, prove me wrong. Show me how that's not going to happen. And don't tell me, oh, well, you're paranoid. It's not going to happen because we're going to be vigilant. That's not an answer. Or this answer, you'll really love this one. They're regulating that stuff anyway. It's already happening. Like, so I should subsidize it happening? So we should allow it to spread? We should dampen the momentum of angry parents who are pushing back on their public schools and trying to demand better, and maybe even demand that the taxation and the government monopoly just end because it's been such a colossal failure. We should slow that momentum down and give people false hope that there's something real, that it's a real choice, that's helpful. How? Exactly. How is that helpful? Well, we'll concentrate these people and then they'll be very defensive of their schools. You think people paying $50,000 right now for private school who are complaining that the school is woke and their kids are getting expelled because they're complaining? You think that plan didn't work? People with money now aren't getting their schools to change. How are people who are dependent on government scholarships going to make it change? Why do those parents have more power in a private school that can kick them out the door tomorrow than the people in the public school who have school boards to yell at? It's nonsensical, their arguments. So, and now we have, this is UNESCO Inclusive Policy Lab, and there is none other than Corey DeAngelis, who you may know from School Choice Boys. Why would American Federation for Children choose an expert from UNESCO's Inclusive Policy Lab to be the voice and face of the entire movement for these bills? I don't have the answer. I'm not professing to know. I am going to tell you, though, that we have asked. Other people and I have asked. Please answer this question. Can you explain? What is his role there? What does he do with UNESCO? Could you help us understand the connection? If he doesn't do anything, why is his face there? Why is his name there? Why is he an expert? Can we use some answers? We don't get answers. I'm a weirdo. I'm suspicious of situations where I ask legitimate questions and I don't get answers, but I don't profess to know. I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not saying anything about him other than this is real. You can go look it up yourself. And I would like to know what it means. That's all I'm saying. I'll leave it at that.
This report reads my mind when it calls on governments to create spaces to foster initiative and to set the conditions for a variety of actors to interact, coordinate, and cooperate. Some people say that non-state actors should not play a role in education. This report shows that, in fact, they already do today and will continue to do so tomorrow. And it is our responsibilities to hashtag write the rules.
Write the rules. It's our responsibility. He's government, by the way, in Sierra Leone. It's our responsibility to write the rules. And notice the spelling, R-I-G-H-T, as in correct, not just right. Write the rules. So I think that's important. I think it's important for you guys to know and how it feeds into some of these other things being taught in school, because obviously they're, even though there's different groups of people and they're working on different parts of the education project, they are aligned in one respect. You, mom and dad, are not in charge. Even your private school, should you go to one or want to go to one, they are not in charge. The state actors have this responsibility to write the rules. The state actors need to oversee these private actors, these non-state actors. Education is a right. So when you take that approach and you're involved in government and you're involved in education under the government monopoly, then how likely are parents going to be to say, don't teach my kid that I was wrong when I said they were a girl or a boy? They just fall back on, what? Who told you had a say in this? Who chooses? We have to square, freedom of choice with this obligation to regulate. Do we? How about no, we don't? How about you don't own my child? So this to me is a classic example to show you how they think they own our kids, and no, they really don't own our kids. But we're going to have to keep telling them that. Yes, Dave, that is correct. Single system means top-down control. I have yet to see any evidence to the contrary, and I keep asking for it, and I keep not seeing it. The last thing I think we're going to cover this evening, because we've already been going for an hour, is I want to share with you information about the National PTA. You may think that the PTA or the National PTA or anything PTA after it is geared towards parents and students, parent-teacher association, that somehow this is where parents have a voice, parents have a say, parents get to go in and influence how schools are run. And then if you join the National PTA, you are going to be having your say. And I am going to show you that that is not the case at all. And that in fact, the National PTA is really much more of a way of enlisting the help of parents to be they pay dues. You pay to belong to this, but as a kind of non-working union member for the teachers union. In other words, you're not a teacher, so you're not really in the teachers union, but you do everything to support their agenda. That's really what, in a nutshell, that's the National PTA. You're sort of an adjunct, like union support organization made up primarily of parents. And as you can imagine, you're going to fall in line with what they want, which of course is diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI is the linchpin of everything. So what I mean by that is you start, if you have like layers, you have the individual student here. Then you have DEI, and DEI wraps all around everything. It's DEI is the justification for everything that's going to be taught to that kid that you might not like. So if it's the comprehensive sex ed, it's the, the critical race theory and the, the Howard Zinnification of our history and all these kinds of things. Well, that's DEI. We got to have equity. We got to have inclusion. We got to have this. We got to, gender theory. That all falls under DEI. And then SEL is the sort of big program that is also justified by DEI, but DEI sort of, says, oh, we have to have this as our values, our highest values. Well, how, so we'll teach this and we'll teach this and we'll teach this. Well, SEL is kind of like the operating system, and those are all just the software products. They're just the software products. And we get the SEL, we're going to change the way the kids think. We're going to teach them how to other themselves, other orient themselves, and really literally other themselves. Like, I'm part of this group and not part of that group. And, we're going to label ourselves. But that's what they're, every child, one voice. Every child, one voice. Wow. Creepy. Now I know they mean the PTA, but the subtle message is, we all have the same opinion here, and that this is the way it should be. Beginning stage, emerging stage, intermediate stage. What is it? What happens when you get to the advanced stage of DEI? Then you have PTAs are focused on systems to improve equity. The primary goal is integration of an equity lens into all aspects of the association's work. This involves making internal and external changes and regularly evaluating processes, programs, and operations to understand if they truly achieve the association's mission. It's all about DEI. It's all about that. And then they go on to, they have more materials that are basically the same thing. And this is the, oh no, we already showed you that. Sorry. I'm trying to get to the right screen here. There's so much material as always. Let's look at this. Okay. This is the final brief. Yeah. So this was their commitment. We believe diversity is our strength. Volunteers and staff must. So you have to accept these premises if you're going to be a volunteer or staff member here. The diversity, equity, inclusion, the collaboration, and all these kinds of things. Now, some of the line items are, pretty benign. You'd read them and you'd be like, okay, work cooperatively and respectfully with colleagues with different roles, goals, and approaches. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea, the definitions they have of these terms are right in line with the anti-racism. So I just wanted you to know that the PTA is about that. Okay. I think that's all I had. There was some other stuff, but I mostly wanted to show you that. I had some more stuff from New Jersey about how to be a straight ally, but I think you've probably overloaded you already with the little second grade book and all of that. So I don't want to keep you guys too long, but, as you can see, things are proceeding apace in terms of whatever we've been doing to try to push back as parents isn't really working. It's working insofar as we're awakening more parents to the fact that they have to pay attention and that their schools could be, off the rails to crazy town, but they're doubling and tripling down. And it didn't start yesterday. In other words, this is 2021, this guy's speaking. And a lot of these programs they have in place, these initiatives, these reports, the research, everything was initiated over a decade ago. So they've put a lot of time, money, effort, et cetera, into these things while we were sort of asleep at the wheel. While we were just frustrated that, the scores were going down, or there wasn't proper discipline in the school, or, why do I have to ride a bus 45 minutes, or whatever our issues were with school. Even before COVID, this stuff was going on behind the scenes. So they're not likely to go, oh, some parents are upset and they're going to school board meetings and they're yelling at us and they don't want these books in the library. Well, that's a bummer because we've invested several $billion in making this happen. And there are quite literally millions of people whose jobs depend on these things happening. And our incentive to listen to these, couple million parents, maybe total, whose money is already tied up in their government. The government has their money. So what's our incentive to listen to them? We don't have to listen to them. They don't have no incentive to listen to us. And so what I keep saying to people in my audience is, I don't say that to like black pill you or scare you or upset you. I get that. I say that to you so you understand that they never will, as long as they have your child. They have your money and they have your child. They have no incentive to change. Why would they? You're letting them know every single day that you need them, that you can't really function without them. That's what you're telling them. It's no different than an abusive relationship. Person's like beating you up, yelling at you, screaming at you, cussing at you, whatever. And you're sitting there going, well, I can't leave. I got nowhere to go. I don't have family. I get, whatever. And people are like, go to the shelter, leave and go to the shelter and get some help and go, like throw away the phone, throw away everything that can be traced and just leave and get away, move to another state, go to a shelter in another place, like go to another city. Just get out. First, get out. First, protect yourself and your children. Get out, away from the abuse. This person's never going to change. They have no incentive to change. And, you can go 10 rounds with that person. But they're more intent on looking for excuses why they can't than looking for solutions or reasons that they will. A process to get out. So I'm just trying to get more parents to see that you can. And when you put your mind to it, you will. And then they can't touch you. They can't touch you. You can be free. You can be free from their nonsense. And if you don't take their money, if you do take their money, you won't be free. But if you don't take their money, then you can be free. This is person again asking personal questions about my children. Yes, my children have started back at their homeschooling. Thank you. And one is in college. So the last thing I'm going to show you, because it's good news, it's actually excellent news, and maybe this will inspire you to listen to what I'm saying and consider, doing it for yourself. This is the latest news out from the National Home Education Research Institute, August 11th of this year. The question was that they researched, does homeschooling improve social competencies and creative thinking among children? Because remember, one of the arguments is, they won't be socialized. They'll be social misfits. They'll be weird. We need them to go to school with SEL because they need to learn the social competencies and all this. And what the research found actually, and this is, you really should go check this out because they detail the methodology behind the research, and you can see how well done it was. I mean, this beats the heck out of all the so-called evidence they give you for SEL. This is some real research. So the concluding comments here, I'll go right to the chase. Citing others, research scholars Madera and Ben David Hadar point out that some persons attribute the development of social competencies to attending public and private institutional schools. On the other hand, they point out the following. Schools also have major social disadvantages, including bullying and peer victimization. Research shows that young people who are frequently victimized and bullied as children are liable to use drugs, etc. The researchers conclude that in their study, homeschoolers exhibited higher achievements on social competency indices than their counterparts attending traditional schools. And their data showed that 96% of the home-educated children participate in some activity at least 1 hour a week and socialize with children of different ages, which is consistent with other studies. Finally, the researchers conclude that their study shows that homeschooling may be more effective in terms of developing creative thinking and social competencies than traditional learning. Therefore, it can offer a high-quality alternative to public education or private schools for those who choose it. So I wanted to share that with you because I'm sitting here telling you all these bad things and showing you bad things. And I know a lot of people say, well, what do we do? How do we, you leave. That's what you do. And if that means that, you're saying, but I have to go to work or this or that. Yes, I understand it's going to be hard. But trying to take your 7-year-old, your 8-year-old, your 9-year-old and persuade them that there really are only two sexes and that's biological reality. And they shouldn't be worried if they don't feel like the one that they were born. And because that no one knows what that is, especially at 7 or 8 when you're pre-sexual. Okay, in the sexual term, right? You might have a gender expression sort of defined by what clothes you like and that, but those are superficial. That it's okay, and not to worry about if you don't think that's difficult, or having to have a conversation every other day with your kid about no, the teacher, no, don't listen to the teacher. And pretty soon your kid may be saying, you don't know anything, mom. You don't know anything, dad. You're stupid. My teacher is the smart one. And my teacher told me that you're part of the system of oppression that's holding me back. My teacher told me that I need to be part of the revolution that, changes everything. And I've got to be the change that I need to see in the world so that we can all be free. And my teacher told me that George Washington was a horrible person. And my teacher do you really want to have those conversations? Do you want to fight that fight? Choose your hard. It's all hard. None of it's easy. So anyway, so that's that. And I hope, that this is helpful in some respects. I will put links after the show. I put some links in the comments, but I'll put them down below as well, in case you forget where to go. But please go to Courage is a Habit and sign up for their newsletter so you can be made aware of when they produce new material. So many useful tools for you to use, especially if your kids really are in school and you need to opt out and you need to figure out how to talk to people about what you're concerned about. Do that. And I will be back on Sunday, this time as scheduled, for the next show. And please tune in tomorrow for Hannah Frankman and me when we talk about success without schooling. I think we're going to be talking about the little kids. We've been talking a lot about the older kids in high school and college, and we're going to talk some more about the little kids tomorrow. So thanks very much for joining me, and I hope you all have a great evening. Thanks a lot, you guys.